If you want to unmute yourself and give me a second, I will record. I have somebody coming in. Okay, I am recording. Ruth, you are welcome to take the floor and let everybody know what's happening.
Okay, thank you all very much for joining us here to share the status of the sperm whale that stranded in Mobile Bay on Thursday. We know everyone's been following this story very closely, and we're just really grateful for the outpouring of support from the community for this really challenging situation that's has never occurred here in our area before. So we appreciate definitely all the public concern for the sick whale and their understanding as we continued our search to safely do our work. Our team of biologists and veterinarians were able to successfully and humanely euthanize the whale this morning. The euthanasia was deemed the best option for this animal who was suffering and unable to swim and survive any longer in the wild. The process, I can tell you, went extremely smoothly. We were a little bit concerned. Of course, there was some bad weather that was supposed to come in, but we were really fortunate to capture a window this morning when all of the conditions were right so that we could make this possible and administer the medication necessary. And I'm happy to take any questions that I can answer. I'll do my best.
So if you have a question, just please unmute yourself and you are welcome to ask your question.
Dr. Carmichael, could you describe that process? Where did it take place? And
is there kind of necropsy scheduled?
I'm sorry, I'm getting two people asking questions simultaneously, and I unfortunately
go ahead, Guy.
Either one.
Okay,
Hold on.
Guy Busby, why don't you go first with your question? Guy, if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead with your question, Dr. Carmichael will take it.
Is there any kind of necropsy scheduled on this?
Yes, sir. Thank you. That's a great question. We want to do our best to determine cause of death. This is something that's certainly of interest to us for our area because the animal is here, but it's also something that's of high interest to everyone along the Gulf who studies our regional populations of these animals, because this species in particular is very wide-ranging in the Gulf, and it's a deep water species. And so whatever it is that affected it, there's a chance that it could be affecting other animals that are out that might wash up in other locations. And so we will be working with our collaborators in the region and at NOAA to conduct a necropsy on the animal to determine cause of death.
Okay, Brad, I think you had a question as well, so I will let you unmute yourself and ask.
There it goes. Yeah, mine was kind of on the same lines. If you could just describe the process, when it occurred, where, and what's being done now.
Sure. So the process is basically what we've been sort of doing for the last few days, which is monitoring the animal, making sure that the conditions were right where the situation would be calm for the animal and it would be most comfortable, but also safe for the biologists, the veterinarians who are trying to do the work. So we monitored the animal this morning, all of the sort of right conditions lined up so that the team of veterinarians who are out there, we were really fortunate, our veterinarian, Dr. Jennifer Bloodgood, and we also had the veterinarian from the Institute for Marine Mammal Studies in Mississippi, Dr. Deb Moore. They were on scene along with the members of the Alabama Marine Mammal Stranding Network, and they were able to get access safely to the animal. The animal was calm, and they were able to administer the medication.
Dale from the Lagniappe, do you have any questions? You can unmute. Okay. Randy Merrow or Kip Raley with Fox 10, if y'all have a question and want to unmute, go for it.
Maybe I missed this, but where was the whale taken?
So the whale will be taken to a secured private property where we'll be able to do the necropsy with enough space. As you can imagine, a 36-foot animal, 30,000 pounds, we need a lot of space to be able to do that successfully and safely as well.
WKRG, would you like to ask a question? Brad, you're open again.
Does the size, weight, what you've seen, does that give you an idea of the age that this whale would have been?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we sort of have enough information to know that it is either a fully sort of grown adult female or maybe a younger adult male, but we won't have a specific age on it until after the necropsy. There are actually methods by which you can age an animal, but not just by, we can just get a rough estimate at this point. And we'll know more once, at this point we can't even tell if it's a male or female, but we'll know soon, I hope.
You talked about this was unprecedented in Mobile, having one come up in the bay. Is there an idea what the population numbers in the Gulf for this species would be?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So for sperm whales, the population is estimated to be 1 to 200 out in the Gulf. And then what was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
Just the population, what the population numbers would be for this species in the Gulf of Mexico.
I'm sorry, I had a little bit of trouble hearing. I wasn't sure if that cut out.
that was the question. If there was a population number for that species in the Gulf of Mexico.
So for the entire northern Gulf, it's probably closer to 1,000. It's hard to know exactly, we don't know exactly where in that throughout its range that this particular animal came from. So I can't tell you about its necessarily specific like subpopulation where we would expect it to be a smaller number of animals, but sperm whales overall throughout the entire northern Gulf, probably closer to 1,000. So now that I heard your whole question.
Do we have any other questions for y'all? Okay, so if there are no more questions at this point in time, we will go ahead and end this meeting. But I will say that this is the time to ask your questions. Dr. Ruth Carmichael and her team have a great deal still to do, so we wanted to provide this opportunity to get any of those answers for you at this time. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming in. And, Guy, do you have a question?
Just real quick, I know that you're waiting on results from the necropsy and all that, but was there any indication in the whale's behavior up to the point that it was euthanized? Have you any indication of what was wrong?
No, that's a really great question. And obviously that's one of the first things we're looking at. So for example, if the whale had sustained some kind of obvious traumatic injury, then that would have given us a clue to something, but we didn't see anything like that. And it's so hard when an animal is this big because it's just big enough that it strands in water that's slightly too deep to give us really good visibility of the animal until we can actually get it out of the water. And that makes it also more challenging to diagnose or to try to speculate on cause of death. And then, of course, if it is something like a disease where it may be biological or viral or fungal, that's the kind of thing where it'll take even longer because we have to send samples out for analysis before we can get a definitive answer back on some of those things. So, at this point, we will probably have the necropsy completed ideally tomorrow. I mean, this is going to be a huge undertaking. So this is how we get to spend our holidays. So, but then it may be weeks before we can actually have a better answer if it's not something that's obvious, if it's something that requires some additional sampling and testing, it may take a little more time, but we will definitely keep everyone posted because we know how invested and interested everyone is. And it's, these are really important questions, and it's about the health of our environment and our system. And so we definitely want to make sure we can bring the answers to everyone as soon as we can.
Will the necropsy be performed on land? And if so, how do you get an animal that large out of the water?
So yes, the necropsy will be performed on land in this case, and that question is something that we've been dealing with actually since last Thursday, when we knew that this was the likely outcome, unfortunately. Heavy equipment is probably the best answer I can give to that.
Okay, any final questions? And Ruth, I know that Kelly put a question in the chat. She wanted to know if there will be video available, or will the media be allowed to get video of the sperm whale being taken to the facility for the necropsy?
So as everyone can imagine, transport and moving the animal, Brad sort of alluded to this in his question. This is dangerous and it's tricky. And so in the interest of the safety, even of my own team, there are professionals that are doing this. And so we won't be able to have people access that area while they're doing this. So it's all going to be done on a secured site so that it can be done safely with people who, this is what they do. They lift heavy things and move them and transport them. So all of that will be done, outside of our purview. And then we'll try to get, we'll get photos of for everyone for the whale once it's actually landed. And we'll also share as much as we can, like I said, regarding cause of death once we have that information.
Does anyone else have any questions? So we are recording this Q&A that we've done with Dr. Carmichael. I will share it out with you all. And as we've been doing over the last couple of days, as Ruth and her team get in touch with me, I will share those updates with you. I do appreciate how everyone has worked with us on this. So at this time, I am going to go ahead and close the meeting. Dr. Carmichael, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you. And Kelly, thank you for joining us for this news conference.
Thank you.